Hello buddy, my name is Oscar W. Fitchett and I'm not quite done with Bond yet. As you can tell by the title of this video, these are my personal top 10 favourite James Bond films. And I do really want to preface by saying top 10 favourite, not top 10 best, because I guarantee you, if I made an objective list, there's some films on this list that wouldn't be on there, but these are my personal favourites. These are films that I personally liked. So how about we just kick things off right away in my top 10 favourite Bond films of all time. And starting off, my 10th favourite James Bond film is... That's right, The Spy Who Loved Me. This is my 10th favourite Bond film. What I liked about this film so much was, I mean, technically this film looked really good with the cinematography. This was a very, very well shot film. Probably one of the best shot films of the Bond franchise. But I mean, I love the fact that the Bond girl was almost an equal to James Bond. This was the first we saw of that, where we had an equal Bond girl to Bond. I mean, other films try to do that. I mean, you know, in Tomorrow Never Dies with Michelle Yeoh, that did an okay job with it. They tried to do something like that in Quantum of Solace. That really didn't work. And I mean, my God, they really tried with Die Another Day with Halle Berry. No, not at all. This is the one that I think works the best with the Russian KGB agent XXX, who is the Bond girl. And I mean, the dynamic between the two I think is really good, between Roger Moore and the actress who plays XXX is really good. This was the introduction of Richard Kiel as Jaws, who in my opinion is the best henchman of the Bond franchise. And I mean, he was so good in this film. It's just such a shame that they ruined him in Moonraker. I never felt bored during this film. I always felt entertained. Especially, again, there's moments where the Bond girl turns the tables on Bond, in terms of Bond is usually the one trying to smooth talk the Bond girl and then like screw over the Bond girl and be like, I don't care because I'm James Bond. That moment happens to James Bond where, you know, he thinks he's in control, but then he wakes up and he turns out, oh wait, she was in control of that situation, which is really cool. Now my number 9 might be a shock to some people of how low this film is, but you know what, it's my personal list. I just prefer 8 other films, but my 9th favourite Bond film is... Yeah, Goldfinger is definitely the most iconic Bond film ever. If I had to point a casual fan of what film to watch for the Bond experience, it's Goldfinger. And if I made an objective list, this film, I guess, would be number 1, but it's not objective, it's subjective. It's my personal favourite. And although I really did like Goldfinger, I mean, Sean Connery really shined in this film. He did a very good job. This is probably his best performance as Bond. I mean, Auric Goldfinger was a really good villain. I thought he did a very good job, and their back and forth, like Bond and Goldfinger's back and forth, was very, very good. And I mean, you had Oddjob, I mean, which is second best Bond henchman underneath Jaws. He's really good. I mean, with the hat and the fight scene between Bond and Oddjob is just superb. It's superb 60s action type of stuff. This was the first film that Q was really, really utilised in. Yeah, he showed up in From Russia with Love, but in From Russia with Love, he only gave Bond, like, here's a briefcase with a knife in it. That's basically kind of it. The briefcase also, you know, was a smoke bomb as well at points. But I mean, this is when Q was like, here's your car, and with the ejector seat. This film is just such a classic film. It's such a classic Bond film. The opening was excellent with the whole, like, fight and then throwing the guy in the bathtub and then throwing the toaster in the bathtub, and the one line of just shocking. Most people know how annoyed of the one-liners I got, especially during the Brosnan and Roger Moore era. But that is a one-liner which I'm like, which I clap and I'm like, yes, I love that in this film, because it's cheesy, but it's not facepalm cheesy. I just love it. Goldfinger, I mean, what can you say? Goldfinger just is Bond. It's the iconic Bond film. And now my number 8. This is where my list becomes subjective. Because I know of people that really don't like this film. I know people that would be like, you put this over Goldfinger? What? But hey, I can't help that my personal 8th favourite Bond film is... Yes, You Only Live Twice is my 8th favourite Bond film. And yes, this is a very personal choice because anyone who knows me knows that I love the Asian culture. I think it's such a cool and interesting, you know, culture. And the fact that Bond fights off ninjas in this film is just... I mean, there's a film that exists where James Bond fights a gang of ninjas. How can you not love this film? But the way this film is shot as well is just so good. It's just such a well shot film in terms of it's shot like an old school Bruce Lee film. And God, I mean, it's Bond. Think about it this way, it's almost Enter the Dragon if you take Bruce Lee out and you put James Bond in there. How would that not be awesome? Plus, this is the introduction of Blofeld. This is the first time we see Blofeld. And I don't mean just like a shadow with a guy just stroking a white cat. No, you see Blofeld. And Donald Pleasance as Blofeld is really good. I wish he played him more. You know what I mean? It's like, it kind of got frustrating with the fact how, like, every incarnation of Blofeld, the actor changed, and I'm like, go just get Donald Pleasance back. He had so much potential. He would have been such a good recurring actor. But oh well. The opening was so good. Like the pre-credit scene was so good. It felt like something out of like The Godfather, almost like a Yakuza Godfather moment. It was so cool. This film's just a cool film, and yeah, sue me, I prefer it to Goldfinger. We're coming on to number 7 now, and my 7th favourite James Bond film is... This was the first Bond film that I kind of saw all the way through. I mean, I remember seeing, you know, Never Say Never Again, which is an unofficial Bond film. I remember seeing bits and pieces of GoldenEye. I remember seeing bits and pieces of Casino Royale. And I remember seeing bits and pieces of like the Sean Connery films, but I never had seen a full Bond film through until I first saw The Man with the Golden Gun a few years ago, which is why it might have a bit of a special place in my heart. I remember sitting watching it with my dad, who's a Bond fan, and you know, that was a cool little bonding thing. Hey, bonding thing. I'm sorry. But yeah, this is Roger Moore's second Bond film, and I do think this is his best Bond film. His Bond films got really out of control at a certain point. But this one just has a good performance by Roger Moore. It has some good Bond girls in it. Yeah, the Bond girl, like Good Night, the Bond girl in the film, did get very cliched towards the end, but I could give that a pass. Christopher Lee as Scaramanga, aka the man with the golden gun, aka the man with the third nipple. He is such a good villain in this. He is like top 3 best villains. He's just such... He's like the anti-Bond. He's like if James Bond was an assassin. If James Bond was a villain, that's basically what Christopher Lee as Scaramanga is. And I mean, how can you not love Christopher Lee in this film? And one thing that really attracts me to this film is the fact that it's a much smaller film. Like, because a lot of the Bond films, especially the Roger Moore ones, try to be so big and try to get like a blinking, almost an army in at the end with a big like a military fight sequence where like guns are going off and like grenades are exploding. The end sequence in this film is a one-on-one duel between Bond and Scaramanga. Yeah, there's a bit of a bomb defusal thing like towards like also there, but there's no like military going in. It's just Bond and the villain. It's smaller scale, which gets me more tense. You know, I'm more involved in the film. I'm not like, oh, well, the military's going to sort it out. I'm like, God, Bond has to do this by himself. And now we come to number 6. And maybe as time goes on, this film might get lower. But at this moment in time, my 6th favourite Bond film is... yeah, it's the newest Bond film. And yeah, it's in my top 10 already. I thought this was a really fantastic film. This film, it had a lot of the good traditional like it had the good traditional formula, which people are complaining about. I'm hearing people critique the fact that Spectre just is very by the numbers Bond formula, but I'm fine with that. You know why? Because I mean, that's a good formula. I think that's a good formula if you do it right, and Spectre does it right. Daniel Craig goes full more traditional Bond, and he does a really good job of being the more suave, confident, shaken not stirred, you know, type of Bond, you know, the Bond, James Bond. That's classic Bond. He's being classic Bond, and that's very good. And starting off my top 5 is a film that maybe some of you might not agree with, but I certainly know Christopher Nolan would agree with it, and that is... yes, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is my 5th favourite Bond film. Would it have been better if Sean Connery would have been in it? Probably. If Sean Connery was Bond in this film, it probably would have been quite a bit better. But I mean, let's not take away from Lazenby. Yeah, he can be kind of wooden, but I think he still does a good job at being Bond. I still buy he's a very suave, smooth MI6 agent. He's definitely more superior in the action scenes compared to Connery. He's definitely more believable, and the action scenes are way more intense. You know, the skiing scene is one of the best action scenes in a Bond film, and that one-liner, he's got a lot of guts. Again, that's another great Bond one-liner that's not facepalm worthy. The filmmaking aspect of this film feels way ahead of its time. I really do think this is a very modern type of film that came out in 1969. And for some reason, they never really stuck with that. They kind of stuck way more for the older style of making a Bond film, where this feels almost very modern with the way it's shot, like the swoop and zoom shots and just the big wide shots of like the snowy Alps. And Diana Rigg as Tracy is just easily top two best Bond girls. She's so good. She's such a good actress, and the chemistry between her and Lazenby is just so good. And I mean, the ending, I'm not going to spoil it, but this is easily, it's probably my favourite ending of a Bond film, just of how heartbreaking it is. A Bond film has a heartbreaking ending. You don't hear people say that. And now on to my number 4. Now, traditional Bond fans, they will definitely disagree with me on this pick for number 4, but I can't help it. I just love License to Kill. Is just such a good film. Again, if you know me, you know I'm a sucker for a good revenge plot. It's a very simple type of story ploy, but if you do it right, I'm hooked in on it. And this is a good revenge film. This is a very good revenge film. This is the furthest away from a Bond film I can think of, because all the other Bond films, they do have that. They definitely have a certain feel of a Bond film. This does feel like a Bond film at points, mainly because of Timothy Dalton's fantastic performance. But aside from that, you could have made this a Die Hard film and it still would have been a very good film. You know, you could have took Bond and put John McClane in it, and it would have been great. I really like that darker, just really dark place of Bond. Like the fact, like basically all Bond is doing in this film is going on a path of revenge. He gets his license to kill revoked, so Bond's gone rogue as he's on this path of revenge against just a Mexican drug cartel because they harmed his friend. That's the premise of this film. There's no missile crisis. There's no let's take out the Russians. It's Bond going on a path of revenge against a Mexican drug cartel. And you got, like, at the helm of this cartel being Sanchez, who is one of the best Bond villains. Yeah, he's got henchmen, he can send people on you, but he's a guy that you wouldn't want to mess with personally. He is threatening on him by himself. He doesn't need the henchmen. He has the henchmen because he can have them. And as I briefly mentioned, Timothy Dalton is just such a good actor, especially in this film. He has the emotion, he has the dark intensity, but he has a good joke as well. Plus Bond fights a gang of ninjas in this film as well, which... heck, another Bond film where Bond fights ninjas. How am I not gonna love it? Now, my number 3, in my review for this film, I praised it so highly. And I mean, I still love it, that's why it's my 3rd favourite Bond film. That being... this is where most people seem to jump on the Bond franchise in terms of making it a really cool thing. Not just a thing that your dad watches, you know, anything like that. This is a thing that most people start watching because of Casino Royale, because we got to the roots of Bond and we see his very first mission. And yeah, there's little action in this film. But when there is action, it's some of the best of the franchise. And also the poker scenes are just so good. They're so intense. They're just... They make me, who doesn't know poker, getting really involved in these poker scenes. They're not boring. They should be boring to me, but they're not. They're intense. Mads Mikkelsen as Le Chiffre does an excellent job because he's such an amazing actor. He's such a beast of an actor. And again, he's not phenomenal in this film, but he's really good, and, you know, you almost sympathise with him, which is very, very, very rare for a Bond villain. And that's very risky, but they pull it off. Daniel Craig in the film is excellent, you know, it's like, he's not fully traditional Bond yet. And he does a good job at still being cool, but when he fails, it's like... that's a rookie mistake, mate. Oh well, Bond. Like, literally, he fails at points. He mucks up at points that the Sean Connery Bond wouldn't have done. Because he's learning, and it's great seeing that. And Eva Green as Vesper Lynd, besides from being just drop dead gorgeous, is the best Bond girl ever. She, I mean, like Diana Rigg in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, she is the only other Bond girl that Bond cares about, like legitimately. The chemistry between Craig and Green are just fantastic. It's really romantic. It does a very good job at portraying the romance. Now my 2nd favourite Bond film. Now this one, a lot of people might be surprised at. I've said that a lot in this list, but this one, people might be. And my 2nd favourite James Bond film is... this was the very first Timothy Dalton film, and as soon as I saw him on screen, I was like I was just... eyes locked on screen. He might be my favourite Bond, I don't know. I really wish he did a 3rd film. I really wish he had more chances as Bond, because God, he was so good. He was so good in this film. This might be shocking to most people who know me as well, considering how much I complained of how old the whole let's defeat the Russians thing got. That got so old for me, and I got so fed up with it. But this film did something different with it. We didn't fully focus on that. It almost felt like an updated version on From Russia with Love. It didn't go full on with the Russian thing, but when it did, you know, like when we actually got to the military base, I wasn't sick of seeing blinking Russian, like, army men just like going, I wasn't sick of it because we were leading up to it. I don't really know how to describe this film necessarily, of how much I really like this film. Just, I mean, every time I just see clips of it, every time I listen to the Bond theme by Aha, like The Living Daylights, you know, just every time I see Timothy, just every time I see something about The Living Daylights, I just get this feeling inside of just like, oh, that was such a good film. Like, I don't, just something about it just makes me go, oh, that was such a good film. It feels traditional. It feels like a very traditional film, but it feels new because of Dalton. It's the film that I will watch in terms of, like, me personally, if I'm like, I fancy watching a traditional Bond film, I'll put on The Living Daylights. It's such a good film. The pre-title sequence is so good. It's such a good, when he's on the blinking car and, you know, all that jazz, and he has to parachute. That's Bond. There's moments in this film which I'm like, yeah, that's Bond, but there are also a lot of moments which I'm like, that's fresh, that's new, and that's just so BA. And now finally, my favourite Bond film of all time. Like, going into this, like, marathon, I was thinking to myself, maybe this won't be my favourite after I watch all of the Bond films, but it still is my favourite Bond film, and my favourite Bond film of all time is... When I say something is the Dark Knight of something, you should take that as if that's most likely going to be my favourite of something. I said Casino Royale is the Batman Begins of the Bond franchise, and I said Skyfall is the Dark Knight of the Bond franchise. But what I love is that this film isn't predictable. I didn't predict this. I could not predict what would happen in this film, which is rare, very, very rare in the Bond film. This is actually the only Bond film which I would think is very unpredictable. All the other ones are kind of predictable. Like, all the other ones, you could watch the film and you'd be like, I get what happens. But this one is kind of very, very unpredictable. And it helps to have a very unpredictable villain, being Raoul Silva, played by Javier Bardem, who is my personal favourite Bond villain. The cinematography by Roger Deakins is masterful. It's a masterpiece of cinematography. Just the fight scene in blinking Shanghai. I think it's Shanghai. Can't remember. When Bond's just fighting the dude and the neon lights are behind them. And that just looks so just mind-blowing. It's like, this is a work of art. The film is very serious, but I like the little touches of humour throughout of it, especially between Bond and Q. And just Bond in general is a lot more funny in the film. Like, but he's not ha ha ha, jokey jokey. He's just realistically funny in the film, which really helps lighten up the film, which makes it enjoyable and rewatchable. Again, this film is sprinkled with many Bond moments. Like, just, okay, that's a total Bond moment. But it does a good job at feeling very modern. And I just love it. It's going to be very hard for anything to really top this film in terms of my favourite Bond film. I can't think of many negatives at all. The ending, I've seen it twice now. The ending, like, watching it a second time still makes me go, it's so good. I love the whole, I just love this film. It's a fantastic film, and Skyfall is my favourite Bond film. So guys, that is my top 10 all-time favourite Bond films. I probably will put a list in the description, which is an IMDb list of how I rank all of the Bond films, so you can see like what my ranking of every single James Bond film is, all 24 of them. You can see where I put certain other films, because I mean, if there's a favourite of yours that didn't make it in this list, you know, see where I ranked it, see if I even liked it, or if you want, check out the reviews that myself and Gary did of every single James Bond film. The link to that playlist will be in the description below, where we reviewed every single Bond film. And yeah, what are your favourite Bond films? What do you think of my list? You know, comment below, let me know. Also in the description, the Twitter links are there to everyone in the Heel crew, as well as the Facebook page. And yeah, till next time guys, I shall see you later, and